Earth, the place where we live, is a planet. And our planet is made out of rock. And we're actually flying through empty space right in this very moment. And our planet, even though it's a rock, then it's actually more or less completely round. And the fact that it's round, that means that if we get into a plane and fly in the same direction, then we will end up exactly where we started. You can try this little experiment by yourself if you want to. You can take a ball and then draw a straight line on the ball. And once you get all the way around to the other side with your line, then you will see you ended up exactly where you started. Planets can look very different from one another, and there's actually some incredibly beautiful planets out there in our universe. But what they all have in common is the fact that they're round, and that's just gravity at work. Everything is always pulled towards the center, and that's why planets are always round. Planets can also be made out of different materials. They don't all have to look like Earth. Earth is made out of primarily rock and some air and some water and different other gases. But some planets are simply just made out of rock. They have no atmosphere, they have no water, they're completely dead. A bit like the planet Mercury, perhaps. And actually, the Earth is very unique. And that means it's the only planet within our reach that has air on it. And in turn, that means we can only live on this one planet. So if we mess it up, then we have no chance of migrating anywhere else. There are two different kinds of planets in our solar system. One of them is a rocky kind. And the rocky kind is like Earth. It has a solid surface, even though there may be water somewhere. And it's very important for a planet to have a solid surface, because that means that plants can take root and actually start growing. And that is one of the key things we need for life to emerge on a planet. We have 4 rocky planets in our solar system, and from closest to the sun, they're called Mercury, Venus, Earth, and then finally Mars. The other type of planet is a gas planet, and gas planets are usually larger than rocky planets, and they're also often referred to as gas giants. These gas planets, they have no solid surface, and that means we cannot land on them with a spacecraft, and we cannot walk on them. We will simply fall straight through. But it also means that life cannot emerge on these planets. And that's why gas planets are completely dead. There are also 4 gas planets in our solar system. And again, if we start closest to the sun, then they're called Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. If we want to become just a little technical about what a planet is, then the International Astronomical Union has actually made 3 criteria upon which you can determine if an object in space can be called a planet or if it should be called something entirely different. These 3 criteria are as follows. Firstly, the planet needs to be in orbit around the sun. Secondly, it needs to be almost completely round. That means it has enough mass and enough gravity to actually have squeezed itself into a planet-like shape. And lastly, the object needs to have cleared its own path around the sun for other small objects. And that means there must be no other objects occupying the same orbit. I'm going to dive a bit deeper and give you some examples, because in our solar system there's a lot of very large asteroids and comets. Some of them are as big as football fields or even bigger. And while they're actually huge and they do orbit around the sun, then they are not planets because they're not big enough to pull themselves into a round shape. They're simply not massive enough. They don't have the gravity required to do that. Another object out in space that is not a planet can be a dwarf planet, just like Pluto or Ceres. These dwarf planets, they orbit the sun, so that means they meet the first criteria. They're also round, so that means they meet the second criteria. But they're both located in asteroid belts. Ceres is located in the inner asteroid belt, and Pluto is located in the outer asteroid belt called the Kuiper belt. And that means they have not cleaned up their own orbit around the sun simply because they're not massive enough to either absorb or hurl the foreign asteroids away from them. And that's why these dwarf planets are not called planets.